She set down her wine, looked me in the eye, and said, "I've been sleeping with Brandon for 6 months. I'm Michael Harris. I didn't yell. I didn't throw a plate. I watched the second hand chew through the quiet and wondered when my family started living without me. Then my son, Ethan, stepped into the doorway. She's not lying, Dad. If this were just a love triangle, I might have begged. But love didn't explain the withdrawals I'd ignored because I was always working, the ones adding up to $200,000 and a truth you won't see coming. In the next 60 seconds, you'll hear why a man walks out without slamming a door, how a lake cabin became a war room, and what happens when a calm voice in a courtroom can hit harder than a fist. Stay with me, judge me if you want, but don't blink, because what broke my marriage wasn't lust, it was leverage. The salmon was cooling on our plates when Lauren set down her glass. The ring of wine on the table looked like a target. She didn't clear her throat. She didn't ease in. I've been seeing Brandon. 6 months. The clock on the wall sounded louder than it should. I didn't flip the table. I counted 3 breaths like my father taught me when the engine wouldn't start in winter. Slow, steady, don't flood it. Lauren watched me like a judge waiting for a plea. I needed someone who shows up, she said. My fork touched china and echoed through the room. 17 years of calendars and carpools and mortgages crowded into that sound. I wanted to ask when it began, where it happened, why he mattered. Instead, I set the fork down and kept my voice even. Thank you for telling me. The words surprised us both. Her eyes flashed, expecting a storm. The storm didn't come. The silence did, and that was worse. Ethan stood in the doorway like he'd been there the whole time. 19 and taller than me now, jaw tight, arms crossed in a way that said he'd practiced this speech. She's not lying, Dad, he said. You're never here. You're always working. You drift. I remembered the soccer game I missed when a job site flooded, the birthday dinner I pushed a week because the concrete pour was off schedule. I paid for braces in summer camps, but I missed the small Tuesday nights that make a family feel like one. Lauren kept her eyes on me as if Ethan were Exhibit A. She was alone, he said. I was here. You weren't. The words didn't land on my chest. They went straight through. I could argue timing, intention, sacrifice. I could list the hours, the miles, the checks. Instead, I swallowed the speech and nodded once. I hear you. His shoulders dropped. Victory or surprise, I couldn't tell. The betrayal wasn't just hers anymore. My father used to say there are 2 kinds of men, the ones who light a match and the ones who cut the gas. I took my keys from the hook and chose the second. The metal clinked against the wall like a bell at last call. Don't walk out, Lauren said, voice brittle. Ethan waited for the explosion that would prove his point. I wasn't going to hand it to him. I pushed in my chair, wiped the counter, and rinsed my plate because habits keep your hands from doing something stupid. No speech, no curses. I let the seconds fill the room, then turned the knob and stepped into the evening. No slam, just a quiet click that felt like a bench judge tapping a file closed. The porch light caught dust in the air. The lawn I mow on Saturdays looked like it belonged to someone else. I didn't look back through the window. I didn't want to see their mouths moving without me. Ohio at night is a string of exit signs and truck stop halos. I drove without a destination, past the billboard that's been peeling since Ethan was in middle school, past the diner where we took him after his first driver's test. The radio offered arguments and oldies. I turned it off and let the tires hum. My father taught me not to drive angry, but he also taught me to keep moving when the weather turned. So I kept the wheel straight and let the dark do its work. The anger cooled into something denser, like a river under ice. I replayed her words and his. I replayed mine, the few I'd allowed. A semi rolled by and shook the cab. I thought about hotels, about calling someone, about turning around and knocking on my own front door. I didn't. South on 33 felt right. The farther I went, the more the road unspooled. Every mile took a little heat with it. The decision wasn't where, it was away. By midnight, I was under the trees, the kind that swallow cell service whole. The cabin's porch sagged the same way it did when Dad and I replaced the steps and called it good enough for now. He left it to me when he passed. One place in this world with no meetings, no neighbors, and no HOA emails. The lock fought me, then gave. The air smelled like cedar and old coffee. I flicked a switch out of habit. Nothing. The power had been off for months. I found the flashlight in the drawer where it always lives, next to a dull pocket knife and a deck of cards missing the Queen of Hearts. I let the beam sweep the room. The plaid couch, the photo of Dad holding a stringer of fish, the dent in the table where Ethan dropped a wrench when he was 11. I set my keys down on the counter. They didn't sound like a bell this time. They sounded like a landing. The screen lit up as if it had been waiting for drama. Missed calls, strings of texts, names that meant different things an hour ago. Lauren. Unknown numbers. Ethan's name. The device vibrated in my palm like a trapped insect. I stared until the previews stopped making sense. Words bending into noise. Talk. Please. Now. I thought about the last time I went 24 hours without a phone. Maybe 2009, when the tower went down in a storm and we lit candles and told stories by the gas stove. We slept better that night than we had in months. I scrolled to settings and did something I haven't done in years. Power off. The screen faded, then went black and honest. I slid the phone into the drawer with the flashlight and the card deck and closed it. The quiet rushed in like tide. I could hear the wind rake the trees and the house settle on its bones. I wasn't disappearing. I was choosing who gets my voice. I boiled water on the camp stove and drank instant coffee that tasted like cardboard and memory. 17 years will give you a mixed bag. Our first apartment with the dented fridge and the secondhand couch. A cheap coffee maker from Target that sputtered like an old man but kept us upright. The roof leak we couldn't afford to fix until tax season. Ethan's first bike, Lauren's first listing, my first crew big enough to need 2 trucks. We grew up together and grew apart by inches you can't measure until you look back. I missed anniversaries I later tried to overcorrect with reservations and roses that felt like IOUs. She asked for conversations. I gave her calendars. None of that excuses what she did, and I won't make it wear a halo. But it explains the soft spots where a story can be bent. I stared at the steam and counted what was left. My name, my work, my son, this cabin. You start again from whatever holds. I opened a can of soup and listened to it pop. Simple food helps when everything else is complicated. I ate standing at the counter like a young man in his first rental. The wind pressed against the walls and backed off. Somewhere a coyote announced himself and then thought better of it. I made the couch into a bed with a blanket that still smelled like last autumn. Sleep didn't come fast. Thoughts buzzed until they ran out of battery. I got up, walked the room once, and sat in Dad's chair. He used to say, "You can't fix what you won't name." So I named it. Betrayal, pride, work, absence, anger, fear. The words didn't solve anything, but they lined up. I lay down again and stared into the dark until shape returned to it. When sleep finally took me, it wasn't mercy. It was maintenance. The kind of rest a man needs before he decides who he is in the morning. Dawn arrived without ceremony, just a pale ribbon through the trees and the smell of wet leaves. I heated water again and poured it over coffee like I was baptizing the day. My hands were steady. That mattered. I walked the perimeter, checked the windows, opened the back door, and let the cold slap my face awake. I made a list on a yellow pad. What I know, what I don't, what I can prove, what I refuse to carry. Underline, do not negotiate with chaos. My father wasn't a lawyer, but he believed in paper. I believe in it too. I wrote Ethan's name and circled it twice. I wrote company, house, bank, truth. The plan wasn't heroic, it was adult. Breathe, document, set the pace, choose the arena. I didn't need revenge, I needed order. The sun got above the pines and drew lines across the floor. When the office opened, I knew exactly who I'd call and exactly how I'd start. At 8:59 a.m., I dialed Mark Sullivan from the cabin porch with a yellow pad on my knee. He answered on the second ring, voice steady like a level on fresh lumber. I told him what Lauren said, what Ethan added, and what I didn't do. No shouting, no scenes. Good, he said. Emotion writes bad contracts. We'll move on facts. He asked for dates, accounts, the rhythm of our money, paychecks, transfers, auto pays. I gave him what I knew and, more importantly, what I didn't. Michael, 2 things, he said. First, document everything Every text, every call, every receipt. Second, don't discuss this with Lauren without me. No midnight negotiations. A woodpecker hammered the oak above me like a timer. You may need to move back into the house for optics, he added, but not yet. Bring me the paper trail. He paused. Check the accounts today. If there's smoke, we'll find the fire. I looked at my list and underlined one word. Proof. I opened the banking app with the same dread you feel when you smell something burning and don't know which outlet did it. The numbers fed me a story I didn't want to read. Transfers I couldn't name, ATM withdrawals in neighborhoods we never visit, a drip that became a creek and then a river. I screenshotted everything and sent it to Mark with short captions. Not me. Not authorized. He called back fast. These align with the timeline you gave me, he said. Roughly 200,000, Michael. The deck boards under my boots felt softer than they were. I thought betrayal would look like lipstick on a collar. It looked like a balance going the wrong way. This changes leverage, Mark said. We're no longer talking only about infidelity. We're talking about marital funds. I wrote the number on my pad, 200,000. I circled it hard enough to tear the paper. I wasn't just hurt. I'd been robbed, and now I would count every dollar. I pulled everything out of the cabinets like a man unloading a flooded garage. Dusty skillets, a cracked mug that says best dad that Ethan gave me at 8, 3 cans of beans that had traveled through 2 winters. I swept corners no broom had seen in years and filled contractor bags until the porch looked like a loading dock. The shop vac roared, and with every pass the floor showed more of its grain. I scrubbed the counter until the old coffee stain finally surrendered. I oiled the hinges that always squealed, and they learned to keep a secret. When the power company flipped the switch that afternoon, the cabin exhaled. The refrigerator hummed like a promise. I set a clean plate in the cupboard and thought about how order is not control, but it's a start. I gave the place back its dignity and took a little for myself. The last bag tied, I found room on a shelf for something new. A file box labeled Truth. Cedar Falls felt like a town that knows your middle name. At Carson's Hardware, Reggie rang up a lockbox, file folders, a portable scanner, and a padlock for the cabin shed. Been a minute, he said, not asking why. Men our age prefer headlines without details. You sticking around? He asked. For a bit, I said. He nodded and told me about his brother's knee surgery, then lowered his voice. When my divorce happened, the guy who won wasn't the loudest. He was the one with receipts. He slid the bag across the counter and added a roll of heavy-duty trash bags without charging me. Outside, a woman I knew from the Rotary gave a quick smile and a quicker look away. I wasn't offended. Small towns practice mercy in private. I loaded the truck and checked my list. Lockbox, scanner, folders, names, dates. I wasn't shopping. I was arming up. On Main Street, church bells started the hour. It sounded like a countdown. Back at the cabin, I cooked eggs in the cleaned skillet and ate them straight from the pan like a man in his first apartment. It's funny what returns. Rinsing dishes immediately, folding a towel the long way, leaving boots by the door so the mud tells less of your story. I noticed the pale band on my ring finger when I washed my hands. I turned the ring once, then set it in the lockbox with the title to my truck. Some things need a quiet place to sit. I did laundry in a coin op in town and read the bulletin board. Lost dog, estate sale, a flyer for a church breakfast with pancakes, $5 all you can eat. The ordinary kept me upright. After dinner, I sat on the porch and let the bugs do their orchestra thing. Loneliness didn't show up with horns. It sat beside me like a neighbor. I made room for it. Then I asked it to leave early. I wrote Ethan a letter by hand because a text turns a father into a notification. I told him the truth without knives. I admitted the nights I missed and the mornings I left before he woke. I reminded him of the oil change we did together when he was 15, how he dropped the drain plug and swore, then looked at me to see if the words stuck. It didn't. We laughed. I told him I was proud of the man he was trying to be, even when he stood against me. I didn't defend myself with hours billed or roofs paid for. I said I loved him, and that love doesn't need a gavel. I signed my name and didn't add a PS. I put the letter in an envelope and didn't put a stamp on it. Some messages need to sit on a table overnight. The cabin got quiet in a way that felt full. I thought about calling. I didn't. Not yet. I turned the kitchen table into a war desk. folders labeled bank, house, company, insurance, messages. I printed statements and taped receipts to printer paper so nothing would slide away. I built a timeline with a ruler, red pen for money moving, blue pen for fights we did and didn't have, black for milestones, anniversaries, Ethan's graduation, my dad's funeral. Facts are stubborn, but they behave if you seat them in rows. I drafted a personal statement for Mark in plain language, what I saw, what I can swear to, what I refuse to guess about. I put a legal pad in a Ziploc for the glove compartment because good ideas aren't polite about weather. When I looked up, the sun had crossed the window and turned the room into a grid. I took a photo of the table from above, like a surveyor marking land. This wasn't vengeance. This was maintenance. The kind you do before a storm so the roof holds. By late afternoon, my phone looked like a slot machine that only pays out anxiety. Lauren's name. Unknown numbers. A text from Ethan. Call me? I read every preview and didn't tap. Mark's voice stayed in my head. Document, don't debate. I let the voicemails collect and sent them to my email with timestamps. I didn't want to hear her voice shape the narrative, not when the facts were busy finding chairs. She texted, "We can fix this, don't make it worse." Then, "You're cruel." Then, "Please." I set the phone face down and wrote in my notebook, "I am not cruel for choosing silence." The urge to reply is a muscle that gets weaker if you don't feed it. I stood, made coffee, and watched a deer cross the tree line like it owned the deed. The phone buzzed again and again, then stopped. The quiet didn't feel like victory. It felt like a witness. I let it sit beside me and say nothing. Morning brought a fog that hung in the trees like torn linen. I split a few logs and stacked them neat, small chores that give you a win before the day takes its swing. I made oatmeal, answered 3 work emails with clean sentences, and fixed a loose hinge on the porch door because doors should do what they promise. After lunch, I walked the ridge trail and remembered being 10 when my dad pointed at a hawk and said, "See how it waits? That's not laziness, that's aim." Back at the cabin, I dozed in the chair I'd always ignored, and when I woke, the knot under my ribs had loosened a notch. Peace like that doesn't last. It's a loan, not a gift. I knew a bill would arrive. Dusk slid in with a cool edge, and the radio, for once, didn't shout at me. I thought, maybe this is what being okay feels like, right up until the news broke it open. The Cedar Falls Chronicle pushed an alert to my phone. Local broker tied to multi-woman investment scam. Brandon Miller's photo sat above a story that sounded like fiction. Phony projects, wire transfers, promises of guaranteed returns. Names I recognized from charity dinners appeared in paragraphs they never wanted. The total losses were approaching 7 figures, the paper said. A councilman's wife had filed a complaint. The state was coordinating with federal authorities. I read it twice and felt 2 things at once: anger at being part of the pattern and relief that the pattern was finally visible. I forwarded the link to Mark with 3 words. We were right. He replied, "This strengthens our position. Save everything." I printed the article and slid it into the file marked Messages. The cabin hummed with the fridge and the low thump of my own pulse. If Brandon was a storm, he'd finally shown up on radar. I folded the paper and set it on the counter like a summons. Mark's advice was simple: move back in, be civil, document everything. So I pulled into the driveway at dusk with a suitcase and a folder box. The porch light flickered like it couldn't decide whose side it was on. Inside, the house smelled like lemon cleaner and distance. I carried my bag to the east guest room, the one far from the primary bedroom, laid a clean shirt in the closet, and opened the window to let real air in. I set a notepad on the nightstand and wrote 3 lines. Be calm, be clear, be brief. The kitchen was too neat, as if a magazine crew had just left. I made grilled cheese because simple food keeps your hands busy. The front door opened. Keys, voices, laughter that tried too hard. Lauren rounded the corner and stopped when she saw me at the stove. "What are you doing here?" she asked. I flipped the sandwich, turned off the burner, and met her eyes. "I live here," I said. Lauren planted herself by the island, arms crossed, chin high. "You walked out," she said. "You don't get to play normal now." I set my plate down, poured water, and answered like I was reading a weather report. I'm here on counsel's advice. East guest room. Shared areas stay neutral. Text me for logistics. Bills, schedules. Ethan. She gave a short, disbelieving laugh. You think you can run this like a board meeting? No, I said. Board meetings have agendas. I slid a spare house key across the counter. It clicked against the marble like a gavel. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to finish what we started. Her eyes searched my face for anger. I let her find none. Calm isn't forgiveness. It's strategy. You don't get to ice me out in my own home, she said, heat rising. Our home, I corrected. Paid for by two people, one of whom stayed faithful. The room tightened. Somewhere a clock ticked. She didn't look away. Neither did I. Ethan stepped in from the hallway, all height and wounded pride. 19 looks a lot like bravery until it breaks. You can't just act like nothing happened, he snapped. Mom was honest. You're punishing her. I set my glass down and faced him square. I'm not punishing anyone. I'm setting boundaries. He shook his head. You left. You always leave. I thought about Little League rainouts, the flooded job site, the anniversary I moved for a concrete pour that couldn't wait. Reasons sound like excuses when the bruise is fresh. You're angry, I said. You get to be. But anger doesn't make lies true. He looked to Lauren for confirmation and found it ready. She needed someone who shows up, he said. I did, I answered. Just not the way you wanted. He flinched like the words stung. You're cold. I'm controlled, I said. There's a difference. His jaw worked. Then say it, he challenged. I took a breath and gave him the sentence I couldn't unsay. This family ended the night your mother chose someone else, I said, steady as a spirit level. No yelling, no blame shifting, no colorful language to cite later. Just the line. Ethan's eyes widened, as if I'd slapped the table. Lauren exhaled like a door seal breaking. Don't put this on me, she said, voice quivering into steel. I was lonely. You were a ghost. I nodded once. I can be boring. I can be absent. I can be wrong. But I wasn't unfaithful. The room heard me anyway. Ethan swallowed. So that's it? That's the truth, I said. What we do with it is next. He looked between us, left and right, as if there might be a third path through. You don't have to pick a side tonight, I added softer. You just have to stop pretending there aren't sides. He stepped back into the hall, breathing hard. Lauren's mouth flattened. You always did love the last word. Not love, I said. Require. The clock kept time. Lauren regrouped fast. This is about your pride, she said. You can't stand that someone saw me. I shook my head. This is about numbers. Her brow wrinkled just enough to register the turn. What numbers? Transfers, withdrawals, the kind the bank highlights for you when you ignore them long enough. She crossed her arms tighter. You're imagining things. You always did get dramatic with money. I build for a living, I said. Numbers are how walls stay up. I pulled a thin folder from my bag and set it on the counter. You don't get to ambush me in my kitchen, she said, a step back telegraphing the hit. This is not an ambush. It's daylight. She reached for the folder, then stopped, as if touching it would stain. If there's a question, we'll handle it, she said, softer, trying a different door. We will, I replied, with dates and amounts. Her eyes flashed toward the hallway, then back to me. You can't prove anything. I opened the folder. There's a sound paper makes when it decides to tell the truth. I laid out the statements in a neat row like planks before a pour, dates, amounts, locations that don't match our lives. I circled transfers in red. I slid over a printout from the Chronicle with Brandon's face above the headline. These line up, I said, tapping. File names, timestamps, your texts. She went pale the way people do when the roller coaster drops before the seatbelt clicks. Where did you get all this? The bank, I said, and the truth has a way of leaving breadcrumbs. She reached for the Chronicle, scanned a paragraph, and put it down as if it burned. He said it was a sure thing, she whispered. Guaranteed. Guarantees are for toasters, I said. Not investments, not marriages, She lifted her chin again, anger returning as armor. You think this makes you clean? No, I answered. It makes me prepared. She pushed the papers away. One slid to the floor like a verdict. We stood on opposite sides of the island, not moving. The house hummed. Refrigerator, HVAC, the soft tick of events settling. Even the air felt charged, like a wire about to arc. Lauren picked up a knife from the cutting board, not threatening, just something to hold. She sliced a tomato that didn't need slicing and let the juice run like a cheap metaphor. You'll use this to humiliate me, she said. You'll tell everyone. I won't have to, I said. That headline travels faster than gossip. She set the knife down too gently. You're enjoying this. No, I said. I'm working. She stepped closer, voice low. You always hide behind work. I paced my breath, 3 in, 3 out. And you hid behind loneliness, I answered. We both hid. You just did it with someone else's hands. The words hung there. She flinched. Somewhere down the hall, a floorboard popped like a small warning shot. I picked up the fallen page and smoothed it flat. That night I moved into the east guest room for real. Fresh sheets, a small lamp, the steady scratch of a pen in my notebook. I texted Lauren our ground rules, payments to track, chores to split, the schedule for showing the house if it came to that. Text only, I wrote, for clarity. She left me on read. I brushed my teeth in the hall bath because neutral ground matters. I labeled a shelf in the fridge. Harris, milk, and yes, it was petty, but pettiness can keep a peace when principle fails. We passed in the hallway like coworkers on a bad project. Morning. Evening. No eye contact needed. I ran early, showered, and left before the house woke. I returned late. The dog we didn't have still seemed to bark in my head. I locked my door, not out of fear, but to keep the night from wandering. The ceiling fan clicked once per revolution, a metronome for a life split in two. Days became a choreography of avoidance. Her wine glass appeared on the counter like a flag. My coffee mug answered from the sink. She turned the TV up during my calls. I mowed the lawn at 8 sharp on Saturday because that's when the HOA says you can. Mail arrived with our names side by side, the last married thing still doing its job. Ethan's texts came less often and landed softer. You home? I'm at Mom's for dinner. Okay. I kept my replies short, not because I didn't care, but because every extra word could be submitted as evidence in the court of regret. At night, light from the primary spilled into the hall like a stage cue. Sometimes I heard her laugh, and it sounded practiced. I answered with silence on purpose. Silent doesn't mean passive. It means I choose my shots. The printers in my office stacked pages. The file box grew muscles. Peace is not the goal in a war like this. Precision is. Friday, she walked into my office without knocking, a glass of red leaving a half moon on a legal pad. We can settle this, she said, or I can take everything. I closed the laptop and looked up. Everything? Half the business, she said. Alimony, the house. I'll tell the court you were never there. Emotional neglect plays, Michael. I folded my hands, felt the weight of my wedding ring still in the lockbox at the cabin. Tell them, I said. Bring your story. I'll bring receipts. Her mouth twitched. You think a judge cares about your spreadsheets? Judges care about proof, I said, and bank records have better memories than we do. She leaned in, eyes bright and hard. I'll ruin you. I stood, kept my voice low. When I push back, I don't raise my voice. I raise the record. She went pale, then flushed, and set the glass down too hard. It wobbled, caught itself, and steadied, exactly how I planned to. Monday, I walked into Franklin County Domestic Relations with a folder under my arm and Mark at my shoulder. Courthouses all smell the same, polish, paper, and coffee that's been braved too long. The bailiff called our case, and Judge Hartman looked over her glasses like a teacher who'd seen every excuse. I took the end seat at counsel table, palms flat, breathing like I was about to lift something heavy. Mark leaned in, murmured the rules older men know by heart. Answer only what's asked. Don't fill the silence. Truth travels better in short sentences. Across the aisle, Lauren adjusted a navy jacket and didn't meet my eyes. Her attorney, Caldwell, smoothed a bright tie as if it were a weapon. When the clerk swore us in, my mouth felt dry and honest. I wasn't here for a scene. I was here for a record. The judge nodded to Caldwell. "Counsel," she said, "you may proceed." The room settled like a lid snapping shut. Caldwell rose like a man who practices his smile in reflective glass. "Your Honor," he began, "this is a marriage of 17 years. Mrs. Harris built the social network that fed Mr. Harris's business. She hosted clients, organized events, raised their son largely alone while he prioritized work, and when her loneliness peaked, she made a mistake. One mistake should not erase a lifetime of partnership." He slid a binder forward, tabs in colors that tried to mean credibility. "We seek a fair division of assets, including an interest in Harris Construction, and support consistent with the marital lifestyle." He paused just long enough to let marital lifestyle echo. Older couples in the gallery shifted like they knew what that phrase costs. He kept going. "Mr. Harris was present but absent. Emotional neglect is no small wound." Caldwell's eyes flicked toward me, then toward Lauren's folded hands. "This court is about equity," he said smoothly, "not punishment." He sat down as if he'd set a table I couldn't move. Mark stood without theatrics. "Your Honor, we disagree on the facts. Mrs. Harris's social contributions are not ownership, and this case is not simply about infidelity. It's about money, marital funds." He lifted a slim stack, not a binder. "Exhibit A, bank statements showing a pattern of withdrawals and transfers totaling approximately $200,000 during the period of the affair. Exhibit B, text messages referencing an investment with Brandon Miller, recently reported as part of a fraud scheme." He handed copies to the clerk, then to Caldwell, who didn't blink but did tighten his grip. The judge read longer than I breathed. She traced a line with a pen, frowned the way you do at a bill you know you paid. "Counsel," she said to Caldwell, "these are serious allegations." Mark nodded once. "We ask that the court preserve Mr. Harris's business interest and consider the withdrawals when weighing support." The judge tapped her stack. "Exhibits are admitted." It wasn't a victory. It was a foothold that held. I raised my right hand and told the truth. The dinner, the sentence, the door that clicked instead of slammed. Mark led me through it like a man measures twice and cuts once. Dates, times, when I discovered the transfers, what I authorized, what I didn't. I kept my answers plain. "Yes, Your Honor." "No." "I don't know." When Mark asked why I left the house that first night, I said, "To prevent a fight my son would remember." When he asked about the money, I looked at the statements and at the judge. "I did not approve these withdrawals," I said. "I didn't know about them until I reviewed the accounts with counsel." I talked about working long hours, not as an alibi, but as a fact. "The company doesn't pour concrete at noon to be convenient," I said. "It pours when the weather and the crew are ready." I wasn't performing. I was placing bricks. The judge watched like she was checking plumb. Lauren took the stand with tissues already in her hand. Caldwell's voice softened, turned the lights down. "Were you lonely?" "Yes." "Did you ask your husband for help?" "I tried," she said, eyes glistening. "He was always somewhere else, even when he was here." She glanced toward me, then back to the judge. "Brandon made me feel seen." Caldwell nodded as if the answer had weight. "Did you intend to harm your family?" "No," she said quickly. "I made a terrible mistake." The gallery leaned in. We've all heard variations of this in kitchens and nursing homes and waiting rooms. Caldwell steered around the money like it was a pothole. "Lauren," he said, "if you could speak to Michael today, what would you say?" She swallowed. "I'm sorry." The word hung and looked smaller under the lights. He sat, and for a breath the courtroom wore her pain. Then Mark stood, and the temperature changed by a few sober degrees. Mark didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. "Mrs. Harris, did you give Brandon Miller money from your joint accounts?" A pause. "Yes." "Approximately how much?" I'm not sure." Mark lifted a page. 200,000? Her throat worked. "That sounds right." "Did Mr. Miller provide contracts?" "No." "Prospectus? Escrow?" No. Did you consult your husband? He would have said no, she whispered. So you didn't, Mark said. During this period, did you also spend over $30,000 on travel and luxury items? Caldwell objected to phrasing. The judge narrowed, Mark rephrased, and Lauren said, yes, again, smaller. He slid the Chronicle article across. You were aware of this investigation? Not until recently. So your certainty came without paperwork, without counsel, and without your husband. Silence answered. Mark stepped back. No further questions. Lauren stared at the carpet like it might open. The judge wrote something long enough to make my pulse pound. The room didn't breathe until her pen stopped. Courts don't shout, they tighten. The air felt like a string tuned too high. You could hear every cough, every whisper of a suit sleeve, the click of a pen cap starting and stopping. I thought of other rooms where time moves slow, hospital waiting areas, DMV lines, the kitchen at 2 a.m. when a teenager is late. The bailiff shifted his weight like even his shoes knew this mattered. Caldwell rose to repair what he could on redirect, but the questions came out thin. Did you ever love your husband? Yes. Did you intend to harm? No. Love doesn't reconcile ledgers. The judge closed her notebook. We'll break for lunch, she said. We'll reconvene at 2. Counsel, be prepared to discuss business interests and temporary support. Her gavel sounded like someone setting down a heavy mug. People stood the way church stands, together, carefully. The hallway filled with footsteps and whispered strategy. The case didn't feel big, it felt specific. Specific can cut deeper than broad. In the hallway, sunlight slashed the tile like it wanted to separate us. Ethan stood by a water fountain, hands in his pockets, looking older than 19 and younger than 10. We didn't rush to each other. We just let the traffic of strangers pass between us. You okay? I asked. He nodded, then shook his head, then shrugged the way men do when all three are true. I didn't know about the money, he said. I thought this was just feelings. I heard Dad in my voice, measure twice. Feelings matter, I said, but they don't balance accounts. He stared at the floor. I told myself you were cold. Sometimes I am, I admitted, but I'm not cruel. He looked up. His eyes were Mom's and mine, depending on the angle. I need to think, he said. Think slow, I answered. He nodded once and stepped back into the flow. We didn't hug. We didn't have to. The distance had started to say less. Mark and I found a quiet corner with bad turkey on white and better coffee. He spread our notes like a map. Judge Hartman is focused on the money, he said. Good for us. Business stays clean. Personal stays personal. He made a quick list. Preserve the company, adjust support for withdrawals, protect the house equity with an offset. Caldwell will push hard for lifestyle maintenance, he added, but the Chronicle article and those statements shift the fulcrum. I thought of teeter-totters and how, as boys, we learned where to sit so we didn't get dumped. Do we settle? I asked. Mark nodded slowly. If terms are reasonable, yes. If not, we let discovery do its work. Paper scares people who've lived off stories. He looked me over. You're doing well. Keep your answers short. Keep your face quiet. We tossed the cups and washed our hands longer than necessary, like cleansing could extend to bank statements. Ready? He asked. Ready, I said. And I was. Back in the courtroom, you could feel a small shift, the way a storm changes when the wind finally picks a lane. Caldwell's tone softened, his confidence thinned around the edges. Lauren watched her hands more than me. When the judge returned, she addressed the room with the patience of someone who's repaired fences before. Given the financial evidence, she said, the court will preserve Mr. Harris's ownership interest in Harris Construction pending final orders. Temporary support is reserved, withdrawals will be considered. No gloating music played, just the hum of the HVAC and the scratch of pens catching up. Caldwell requested more time to review exhibits. Granted. We set dates. The gavel tapped again, not a slam, just a mark on the timeline. As we filed out, Lauren sneaked a glance that mixed anger with something like recognition. I didn't meet it. In the hall, Mark buttoned his jacket. The board is tilting, he said. I exhaled for what felt like the first time all day. The ground held. By midweek, the Chronicle wasn't alone. Local TV ran Brandon's face between weather and traffic. Broker tied to multi-woman scam. The anchor's voice was polite. The graphics weren't. Photos of ribbon cuttings, charity galas, holiday mixers, Brandon smiling beside a different woman in every frame. The story filled in the blanks, fake developments, guaranteed returns, a paper trail that looked like a maze with no exit. A councilman's wife went on record. Losses were now well into 7 figures. His office door had a fresh lock and a darker rumor. In small towns, shame travels faster than sirens. At the grocery, conversation lowered the way it does when someone in uniform walks by. I bought coffee and printer ink and stood under the fluorescent lights reading the crawl on my phone. 2 sentences hit me like a hammer to a nail. Several victims provided funds from joint accounts. Some partners were unaware. My jaw unclenched. The town finally knew what my bank statements had been saying. Reputation is a porch light. Once it flickers, everyone notices the dark. The charity board asked Lauren to step back. Her brokerage put her on leave. Friends who once traded recipes and referrals suddenly needed to circle back next month. She stopped tagging restaurants. She started posting quotes about growth. At home, packages kept arriving, returns she'd forgotten she ordered. She moved slower through the rooms like the air was heavier. One afternoon, she showed up at my office glassy-eyed, a takeout cup trembling in her hand. "Can we talk?" she asked. Mark had coached me for moments like this. Be kind, be brief, be on record. I buzzed in our receptionist, left the door open, and sat where the security camera could see both of us. "Caldwell is working on a proposal," she said, voice frayed. "People won't look at me." I folded my hands. "I'm sorry it's hard," I said. "But hard isn't the same as unfair." Her mouth opened, then closed. For once, she had no script. Ethan texted, "Can we meet?" We chose a park bench near downtown, where ducks heckle joggers and the fountain pretends to be a river. He sat, elbows on knees, a boy and a man sharing one frame. "Is all of it true?" he asked, eyes on the water. "About Brandon? The money?" I didn't reach for his shoulder. I reached for the folder I'd brought. "I won't make you choose," I said. "I'll show you what I know." He ran a hand through his hair the way he did before finals. "Mom says it's being blown up," he said. "That they're twisting it." I nodded once. "That's what people say when facts won't bend." He swallowed. "I don't want to hate her." "You don't have to," I said. "You just have to look at this before you decide who we are to each other." He stared at the folder like it might bite. "Okay," he said. "Show me." I opened it, and the wind lifted the first page. I laid out statements like a teacher grading in public. Dates, amounts, locations. I traced the red circles I'd drawn, then slid over screenshots of texts with Brandon's name floating above "sure thing" and "guaranteed." I showed him my timeline. Blue ink for the nights that went sideways. Black ink for milestones that should have mattered more than they did. "Did you approve any of this?" he asked, voice thin. "No." "Did she ask?" "No." He stared at a line that moved like a heartbeat you don't want on a monitor. 200,000, Dad? That's the number. He pinched the bridge of his nose. A mother and toddler walked by, and the kid laughed at a pigeon. Life continued its rude habit of not stopping for our worst days. Ethan set the papers down. "Why didn't you tell me sooner?" "Because I'm your father," I said. "Not your jury." He nodded, eyes wet. "One more thing," he said. "Did she tell me first, to get to you?" He answered himself while I watched. You can see it happen with men his age. The brain catches up to the heart, and the heart fights, then gives ground. He replayed the night in our kitchen, the wine, the statement, the way Lauren's eyes flicked to me and back to him. "She looked proud," he said, almost to the fountain, like she'd already won something. He rubbed his thumb and forefinger together, a habit from childhood when he was working out a knot. "I thought she needed me. Maybe she needed me against you." I didn't move. "It's heavy," I said. "Take your time." He nodded. "She always told me you'd pick work over people. he said. And I believed her because it was easier than thinking she'd do this. He blew out a breath. She used me, didn't she? I didn't gloat. She used your love, I said. He flinched at the word, then straightened, a little taller. Acceptance isn't warm, it's solid. He was finding ground. I'm sorry, he said, fast at first, then slower, as if the word had weight he hadn't trained for. I treated you like the villain because it fit the story I wanted. I let it settle. Older men like me learned that accepting an apology is not the same as erasing what came before it. Thank you, I said. That matters. He searched my face. Are we okay? We're in the process of okay, I answered. Trust is a muscle. We'll work it. His shoulders dropped a notch. What does that look like? It looks like Wednesday dinners, I said. It looks like calling when you're angry instead of posting. It looks like we let facts lead when feelings get loud. He almost smiled. Dinner, he repeated, like he was testing a new shoe. I can do that. He stood, then sat again. Do you still want me at the house? I want you where you're safe, I said. With either of us, both of us, but eyes open. We started with simple repairs. He helped me change the air filter in my truck because small fixes build a rhythm. We ate burgers at a place that still uses real plates and calls you on. He laughed once without catching it, and we both let it ring. He asked about the first crew I ever ran, and I told him how we misread a blueprint and poured a footer 2 feet off, then spent Saturday jackhammering our mistake into gravel. You respect concrete after that, I said, and humility. He nodded like the lesson landed somewhere he'd use it. Back at the cabin, we stacked wood in silence that didn't bite. Before he left, he stopped at the door. Do you think Mom can fix any of this? He asked. I looked at the neat rows we'd made. She can fix her side, I said. Only she can. He pulled me into a quick hug, the kind men do when the need outruns the training. That was enough. A week later, Judge Hartman read from the bench with the same cadence people use for recipes they trust. On the issue of spousal support, limited term, adjusted downward in light of unauthorized withdrawals. Caldwell stiffened. Mark's pen didn't move. On the marital residence to be sold, proceeds divided, reduced by an offset of $200,000 to Mr. Harris. I kept breathing. On Harris Construction, awarded solely to Mr. Harris. Mrs. Harris's contributions, while social, do not rise to ownership. The gavel's knock was polite, final. No one cheered. This wasn't that kind of courtroom. Papers shuffled. Dates were set for property inspections and account closures. I felt something settle in my chest that wasn't triumph. It was alignment, like a door hung true after weeks of rubbing the jam. We stood because everyone stands, and the bailiff didn't have to ask twice. When I looked to Ethan, he didn't look away. He didn't smile either. He just nodded once, like a man confirming the level. In the hallway, Lauren's mascara had given up. Caldwell talked in low, urgent tones about appeal windows and narrative reframing, and she nodded as if those phrases were life preservers. She saw me and started toward us, then stopped, then started again. Michael, she said, reaching without quite reaching, I'm... The word hung there, worn out from overuse. I didn't rescue it. Ethan stood between us, not as a wall but as a witness. She looked at him, at me, at the elevator numbers counting down. I didn't think it would go this way, she said, voice sanded raw. None of us did, I answered. But the numbers did. Caldwell touched her elbow. We'll be in touch, he said, professional sympathy polished to a shine. The elevator arrived. She stepped in, eyes on the floor. Doors closed on a woman I'd married, a version I no longer knew. I didn't feel bigger. I felt exact. Sometimes exact is the only mercy you can offer. Outside, the sky had the clean blue you only get after a storm chooses a direction. Mark shook my hand. Go home, he said. Eat something that isn't from a courthouse vending machine. I promised I would. On the walk to the car, the courthouse steps felt steeper than they had in the morning. I paused halfway and looked back, not at the building, but at the line of people waiting to be told what their lives meant on paper. No one wins here, not really. Some of us just leave with fewer broken beams. At the truck, I sat with the door open and let the sun warm the steering wheel. My phone buzzed. A text from Ethan. "Wednesday still on?" I typed, "Yes, 6 p.m. Then I put the phone face down and listened to the traffic. Triumph would have wanted an audience. Closure is quiet. I turned the key. The engine caught on the first try. Tomorrow there would be keys to a new place. Tonight, there was a drive. The new condo sat by the river with windows that make even Tuesday look important. I carried in 3 boxes and a broom. Age teaches you to move with less. The elevator smelled like paint and possibility. Inside, I set my toolbox under the sink, lined one shelf with coffee and oatmeal, and hung a single photo. Dad in a faded cap, holding a stringer of fish like proof you can provide without bragging. I left the ring in the lockbox, then slid the box into the closet. The place sounded honest. No echoes of arguments, no footsteps that pause outside a door. I tightened a loose cabinet hinge because starting small keeps your hands from shaking. On the balcony, geese stitched the water and a jogger waved like we already knew each other. I answered a work email, ordered a mattress, and ate dinner off a paper plate by choice. Peace didn't roar. It clicked like a good latch. Then my phone buzzed. "You settled in?" It was Ethan. We made it simple. Burgers, 7 o'clock, no speeches. Ethan stepped in and looked around the way a man measures a room for exits and memories. "Nice place," he said. "It works," I answered. He set a 6-pack in the fridge and held one up without opening it. We ate at the counter. He told me about a brutal midterm. I told him the plumber's trick for freeing a stuck shutoff valve. Steady pressure, no jerking. He laughed, a real sound. "So that's your philosophy?" he asked. "For pipes and people," I said. He studied the photo of Dad. "Grandpa looked tough." "He was fair," I said. "Tough follows fair." After dishes, he lingered by the door. "Are we okay?" I didn't rush the answer. "We're building okay. Bricks, not wishes." He nodded. "I can carry bricks." He hugged me quick like a runner grabbing water and stepped into the hall. When the door shut, the condo felt larger, not lonelier. Progress makes its own light. The next afternoon, my office line lit up with a name I knew from headlines and charity pictures. "Mr. Harris?" It's Julia Bennett. Her voice had the careful strength of someone who's been giving directions to paramedics. "I wouldn't call if it weren't important," she said. "It's about Brandon. And about Lauren." I put the phone on speaker, hit record, and said, "I'm listening." Julia exhaled. "Several of us are meeting, women he targeted. We're comparing notes, pooling evidence, trying to get our dignity to stop shaking." She paused. "Lauren came to one meeting. She left early. I asked if she was safe." Julia hesitated. "She's adrift. The money's thin, the invites stopped, and she won't ask family. I'm not calling to mend your marriage. I'm calling because people fall hard after the news cycle moves on." I glanced at my notebook and wrote 2 words: human costs. "Thank you for telling me," I said. "I don't know what I can do." "I know," Julia said. "I just thought you should hear." We met at a church basement that smelled like coffee and dusted donuts. Folding chairs, a crock pot, a stack of tissues. Women introduced themselves by first name and a number that hurt. 75, 200. Everything. The stories braided, promises, wire transfers, guaranteed, soon, next week. They didn't compete in grief, they synchronized. Julia kept time, handing out a simple worksheet. Who, when, how much, what proof. It looked like homework but felt like scaffolding. I wasn't there to speak. I was there to listen. Older men will understand. Sometimes the best tool is a quiet pocket knife. When the break came, Julia touched my elbow. "Lauren left with a migraine," she said. "She's ashamed, then angry, then ashamed again." I pictured the porch light at our old house flickering. "Shame is a poor electrician," I said. "It shorts out the right circuits." A woman from my rotary nodded at me from across the room. Not friendly, not cold, just recognizing another survivor of a different kind. We packed chairs like we were rebuilding something. Saturday morning, Ethan called from a parking lot. You can hear asphalt in a voice. Mom's moving, he said. Portland, small brokerage. Starts in 2 weeks if she can scrape first and last. I leaned against the balcony rail and watched a barge push the river into shapes it didn't ask for. Is she okay? I asked. She's trying, he said. Some friends stopped answering. The charity board won't have her back. She says Portland is a reset. He waited, like the word might be a test. Resets work when you change the settings, I said. Not just the scenery. He sighed. I told her that. She cried. Then she packed a box labeled kitchen memories, and I didn't know where to put it. The geese lifted off in a ragged V. Are you helping her move? Yeah, he said. Next weekend. The pause stretched. She asked if you'd meet her before she goes, for closure. I watched a cloud erase a square of sun. What did you say? I said I'd ask. I don't believe in performative closures. No camera-ready confessions, no hugs for the crowd. But I believe in clean lines. Tell your mother I'll meet her, I said. 15 minutes. Public place, no history lessons. Ethan blew out a breath. Thank you. I could hear him relay the message in his head, editing for tone. One more thing, I added. I'm not going to fix the story. I'll hear it. Understood, he said. Morgan's Cafe, 2 p.m. tomorrow? That works. After we hung up, I stood in the kitchen and wiped a counter that didn't need wiping. Habits help when feelings don't. I texted Mark. Meeting Lauren. Public. Brief. He responded with a thumbs up and 3 reminders. Stay calm, stay short, stay standing if needed. I ironed a shirt because presentation is a choice. Before bed, I opened the lockbox and looked at the ring. I didn't put it on. I set it in the palm of my hand, felt the weight, then closed the lid. Morgan smelled like citrus cleaner and good intentions. I chose a seat by the window with my back to the wall, old habit from job site meetings where tempers come with boots. Lauren arrived on time in a blue dress that used to belong to a busier life. She looked past me first, scanning for sympathy or danger, then sat and placed both hands around a cup she didn't drink. Thank you for coming, she said. I didn't think you would. Neither did I answered. We covered logistics like adults, closing dates, mail forwarding, the last utility bill. Then the air asked for truth. I want to apologize, she said, voice steady like it had practiced on the drive. For the affair, for the money, for dragging Ethan into the middle. I didn't nod. I let the words land. I blamed you because it was easier than blaming myself. You were steady, so I called you cold. She looked at her hands. I was wrong. The cup steamed between us like a truce flag. Silence tested the table's legs. Outside, the light turned the traffic into a parade of decisions. There's one more thing, Lauren said. Her eyes met mine without flinching. The night I told Ethan first, I did it to hurt you. No wobble in the voice, no caveats. I knew he'd take my side if he heard it from me. I wanted you alone before you even heard the words. People will tell you they didn't mean it. She didn't. She owned it. The old me would have tried to explain it away, to make it symmetrical. The new me stacked it on the pile labeled facts and checked if the table still held. It did. Thank you for saying it, I said. Her shoulders slumped like a beam relieved of a bad load. I'm sorry, she whispered, and the word didn't sound like a coupon anymore. She reached for the cup, took a sip, and winced. It had gone cold. Some things do when you finally tell the truth. I stood to leave because endings deserve posture. Lauren, I said, I appreciate the apology. It changes nothing on paper, but it changes the air. She nodded, tears making a slow path that didn't ask to be hidden. Are you happy? She asked, as if happiness were a switch you could point to. I'm at peace, I answered. That's enough. She tried for a smile. And Claire? A friend, I said. Not your villain. She looked at the clock, then at the door, like Portland was behind it. Why did you ask Ethan that question? She asked. About why I told him first. You already knew. I wanted to hear you say it, I said. She took a breath, then another, like someone learning to swim. Goodbye, Michael. Goodbye, Lauren. I didn't watch her go. I stepped into the afternoon, the kind of light that makes even bad days readable. This wasn't victory. This was the period at the end of a sentence I wrote carefully. Here's what I know after all of it. I didn't win. I endured, I rebuilt, and I learned to keep my voice calm even when the room was on fire. Fidelity isn't a bouquet you bring on anniversaries. It's the foundation under the house. When a foundation cracks, you can stand there blaming the weather, or you can pick up a trowel and start again. I chose to start again. I kept what was true, my name, my work, my son, and I let the rest leave without a speech. If you're standing where I stood, hear me. Peace is earned by the next right action, not by the last wrong one. Now it's your turn. Do you forgive, try to rebuild, or draw a clean line and walk? Drop your choice in the comments. Tell me why. If this story hit a nerve, tap like, share it with someone who needs it, and subscribe. Next time, we'll talk about staying whole, together.